Did the pandemic begin in a laboratory? And if so, will it be considered an act of war? Let me tell you the reasons for why that might be the case, and let me tell you about whether or not this pandemic began in a lab, or even if that matters. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're going to talk about something very important, and I want your input on this. I want you guys to leave comments below about what we're about to talk about, because there's a lot coming on the horizon that we can foresee if we just look at all the messaging that's being telegraphed to us and put it together in an equation and say, this is what this is going to equal. This pandemic may or may not have began in a lab. There's a lot of rhetoric going on right now saying that everything started in a laboratory over in China, and that this is all because of an accident, or who knows, an purposed placement of this virus to expand throughout the rest of the globe and cause havoc. Now, either way, there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not that's correct. It could be propaganda, it could just be rhetoric to kind of move our leadership's agenda forward, and it could have some validity to it. What matters is that our leadership right now is in a position to just tell us whatever they want to tell us and let us know what they want us to know when it comes to the origins of this pandemic. That being said, if they come out and say this pandemic did originate in a lab in China and this virus was leaked out onto the public either on purpose or on accident, we are looking at a conflict on a global level, and here's why. Let me explain this to you. I want you guys to keep everything in mind that we've gone through so far. We're dealing with an economic collapse of epic proportions. We're dealing with an energy war in the OPEC section where they want oil to raise and drop to certain price points to where it benefits other countries more so than our own. And we're dealing with a global pandemic all at the same time. Any one of those situations could lead to a conflict on its own, but we're in a powder keg right now of all these different scenarios coming together as one. This is something you need to consider and need to be looking for here in the near future. Conflict is more than likely on its way. It's at a point right now where it's more likely to happen than to not happen. And the rhetoric surrounding this whole situation about whether or not this pandemic began in a laboratory versus just from a bat being eaten in a wet market is a huge part of this equation. And quickly, if you do want to stay informed or stay on top of what's going on in this whole situation, or if you want to share your ideas about what you think is really going on out there, leave a comment below and hit that subscribe button as well so that we can keep the conversation going, because who knows when these kinds of platforms are finally going to get shut down, just like everything else that's being shut down, right? So if our leadership comes out and says, here's what's going on. This originated in a lab. It was either leaked out on purpose or on accident. Either way, it doesn't matter. We are being affected by something that was created by a foreign entity that does not have our best interest at heart. How often has that gone well for anyone in the past or in history? When a foreign entity causes havoc for another foreign entity, those two entities tend to collide in a cataclysmic way very often, because you can't let the deed go unpunished. And we all know there's already lawsuits, there's already sanctions and everything else being drafted up in order to punish China for this situation, which they will not react to well either. So, something I want you to consider, and why I think we're on the brink of conflict, and why I think we should all be very weary about what happens next and what kind of rhetoric or propaganda that we're hearing from our leadership, okay? 2,403 people died in the attack on Pearl Harbor. That started the United States entry into World War II, okay? That was 2,403 people that needed our support to go to war and to get those people basically avenged, and to show the rest of the world that you can't come here and just do whatever you want, okay? Then, the next big conflict that we are all, at least in our generation, very aware of and very attuned with is what happened after 9/11, okay? And on 9/11, 2,996 American lives were lost, okay? Whatever happened in those attacks, whatever happened in that day, doesn't make a difference to those lives that were lost and the countless amount of people who were injured and have suffered health issues and everything else ever since that day. That's how many lives were lost in that moment that then caused a huge conflict over in Iraq, which we all know led to the years and years of being in Afghanistan, as well as all the disruption in the Middle East, causing a lot of our issues that we have with Iran today. There's a lot of things going on when it still comes to that conflict itself. 2,996 American lives lost. Tragedy, huge tragedy, okay? That being said, this virus, this pandemic that could have or could not have began in a laboratory over in Wuhan, China, this virus so far has claimed the lives of 73,556 Americans, okay? Yes, we can compare that to car accidents. We can compare that to suicide. We can compare that to the flu. There's a million things you can compare it to make that number seem not as big as it is. However, in previous events where people have lost their lives due to foreign actions that cause that loss of life, we have then entered into a wartime state. And now we're talking about the ability of our leadership to literally come out in the media and just say, this came from a lab in China. It was weaponized and it was given to us on purpose. And now 73,000, as of today, 566 American lives have been lost because of their actions. That is a lot bigger of a number than the previous two events I just spoke about that resulted in the loss of American lives and moving into a conflict of epic proportions, okay? You all should be considering this. This is not just a bunch of hearsay. This is not just a bunch of pandering or anything like that. This is just facts. These are numbers that are being given to us right now. These are the numbers that were used for those other two events that happened, and the numbers that we are in right now exceed those extremely. And that is very concerning to me, because if there is going to be a conflict and if something was to happen from this whole scenario, they have all the tools and all the gas they need to justify it, and they can do what they will with that information. And we all have to be very vigilant right now, because we know a lot of misinformation has been had over the last 4 months. None of us have been told the truth for a long time now. But as people who are preppers, of the prepared mindset and worried about trying to survive any of these different scenarios, we have a duty to ourselves, to our families, and to those that are in our groups, that we try to look forward into the future and see what might be coming our way so we can prepare as best as we can. Now, preparing for a conflict on that level isn't as easy as it sounds, and I think we can all agree on that. However, preparing for any type of disaster or emergency will help put you ahead of the curve, and that's what you should still be doing. Don't use this downtime, the eye of the storm, you might say, as a reason to stop stocking up on supplies. Don't think that, well, now that there is beans and rice back on the shelves, I don't have to worry about buying more, because it obviously is going to be available. We all know food shortages are coming. We all know the economy is crumbling, and we all know that conflict could be right on the horizon. And if you think you'll have unlimited access to any of those items for the rest of time, then I believe you're mistaken. And I think you should rethink your planning, because really, we can use this downtime to our advantage and continue to resupply rather than thinking everything's going back to normal, because I really doubt that it is. So please be vigilant. Be very aware that this conflict is very likely to happen. There's already been escalations around the globe in different arenas of different entities being involved with each other and being expelled from certain zones, and as well as the fact that we're seeing a lot of political jargon happening around the world as well. Certain leadership has disappeared for periods of time. There has been a lot of speculation as to possible coup attempts. Who knows what's really going on when all these different events are happening simultaneously? And let me be the first to say, and the last to say, and the 1 millionth person to say that during times like these are when they try to slip things under the radar, because you're not actually paying attention. That being said, make sure you keep preparing, make sure you keep resupplying, get food, so much food, because the shortages are coming. And with shortages and with economic crisis and with a pandemic, a conflict is just one misstep away, and we have to be very aware of that. And if you think about the numbers that we talked about here today, what would justify us not going to a conflict if things were either proven to be true in the way that some people think they might be, or if we were just told they were? And that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.